Enjoy the holiday season with the Ultra Alolan Festivities design. Available on hoodies, notebooks, mugs even. Get one for yourself to wrap up nice and warm, or one for a friend, and links to where you can get your own are in the description below. Pokemon has given me so much, from the games I played as a child in the time of Pokemania, where Pokemon cards and figurines were on the playground, and even in my cereal, to today, where we have Pokemon Go, Sun and Moon, and re-releases of those first games. And I've been in love with this franchise from start to finish. From the lovable monsters I can collect to the worlds I explore and the challenges I face, I always am left with a single question. Why can't Pokemon be real? And I think at its heart, the core of any fantasy or sci-fi series is about immersing the audience member, not to just feel like they want to watch the story time and time again, but that they actually want to be part of the story world. This is something the original Pokemon games did masterfully, with a good combination of music, original plot, sharing with friends, and raising and caring for your own virtual monsters. It made us feel like we really were Pokemon masters. So a thank you to everything fantastical that Pokemon has brought us. However, with the recent release of Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon coming out soon, as well as the re-release of older titles like Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, and Silver, and playing these games back to back, I find myself wondering, is there a reason for the fact I'm more excited for the re-releases of Generation 2 than I am for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? Is this just a sign of nostalgia and I seeing the past with rose-tinted 8-bit glasses, or is there something missing from the newer titles that the old games had? And I tell no lie here, of course I'm looking with nostalgia. These games were my formative years, they were what brought me into my love of Pokemon. That said, I felt as a player that Sun and Moon were lacking in a few departments, and conversations amongst the community all seem to suggest that maybe I'm not alone in this feeling. So I want to take some time to explore the Pokemon games, the newer ones, and in 4 different aspects expose how, like Pokemon, everything has a weakness that maybe needs to be covered and addressed. And of course, I invite you in the audience to extend this discussion in the comments. It's worth noting as to what makes a great Pokemon game, there are actually 6 elements I wanted to discuss, with the first 2 being music and the Pokemon creatures, but these are aspects that Pokemon has done right almost all of the time. Any apprehensions you might have about a Pokemon's design is simply subjective. It's not possible to like all Pokemon, there's so many of them, but what is your least favorite may be someone else's favorite. My personal least favorite are the elemental monkeys from Generation 5, and yet I know people who adore these Pokemon. Pokemon itself is not at fault for the designs that I might think are more ridiculous or stupid, rather, that's on me. The music itself is also down to personal preference, however, Pokemon does a really good job with the music of making you feel something without telling you to feel it. Take the music of any of the Pokemon towns and realize that the music isn't telling you to feel a certain way. 90% of the time this is the case within Pokemon, rather the music just complements the visuals that are going on. It lets you know that maybe Lavender Town is a little creepy without outright being a creepy bit of music. It lets you know that the Pokemon Center is a cheerful rest stop without actually telling you that this is a safe space. And certainly some of the battle themes like Cynthia's are absolutely incredible, displaying power without being your usual droning sound effects. So let's talk about an area that I maybe don't want to praise so much anymore, which is the regions. As the games have progressed, regions have gone from being wide open spaces with multiple circles and loops leading back around on themselves, as well as pathways that can be taken in any order, to more or less one giant circle. Unova is the worst offender in this case. It finds only a little resolution in its sequel game, with parts of a circle not needing to be visitable until the post-game, but both Unova and Kalos' maps are designed in this way, taking you from one point round naturally to the next point in one giant circle. Alola is no better. At first glance, it's not a giant circle, but it's actually worse. There's an illusion of there not being a linear path by having you island hop, but realistically, you are just going on one long pathway, only needing to revisit yourself once for Marley City. Other than this, the game is basically on rails, telling you exactly where to go next. But this wasn't always the case. In Gold and Silver, when you reach Ecruteak City, you could go right to the Lake of Rage, or you go left to Olivine. You might be compelled by the Togepi egg you've been given to go back to Professor Elm, or, once getting Surf, going and exploring the Dark Cave or the ruins of Alph some more. There were plenty new options being opened up to you just by a single route. If you wanted to go ahead with the main suggested story and go on to Olivine City, you could do that just fine. However, if you wanted to play the game your own way, a different way, well, you had options. In Red, Blue, and Yellow as well, you had Saffron City, a metropolis between 4 other locations, and with those locations you could choose a number of routes to get between them. The Diglett Tunnel, the Cycling Road, Some of these sections were cut off by a Snorlax or a guy who needed a tea, but after your second or third gym badge, you didn't actually need to traverse these towns in any particular order. You can get Koga and Sabrina's gym badge before you get Erica's, you can do the Team Rocket stuff in Lavender Town first and then go and do the underground Team Rocket hideout in Celadon City, or you can do Silphco pretty much right away. There are a number of different routes and options you can take here, and this all adds to the role-playing game. Pokemon is at its heart supposed to be a fantasy RPG. You're supposed to make decisions. Even Hoenn does this masterfully with a number of routes leading back to Rustboro. You can either take the Van Turf Tunnel, which you get later on in the game, or even later than that still, you can take Meteor Falls, or a little bit later on in the game, once you have Surf, you can take Route 103 to cut between routes. The whole first half of the map can be explored in a number of different ways. And exploring the Pokemon world is what makes it feel real. That freedom, that decision making, that choice is what makes it your adventure. In the later games, the only real difference between my adventure and your adventure may be the starters we picked or the Pokemon we caught, but in the older games, you could choose any number of routes to go down. There is very much an obvious way to do them, a suggested mode, but you don't actually have to obey to that. In these somewhat filler portions of the game, you can explore the routes in any order and it becomes your game, your adventure. This is time when you invest into the story. Make the story yours so you care about the cutscenes and required events a little bit more when they happen. To make this role-playing game yours, you must have choice. The second thing I want to look at is story, because the element of choice is very important here. While recently playing my way through Sun and Moon, I found myself hounded by characters telling me what to do or where to go. In fact, in that early game, you couldn't be out of your house for more than 5 seconds without a character interrupting you to let you know exactly what's going on. In the older games, you'd have one conversation with your mum who would tell you the professor wants to see you, you'd go see the professor, and the professor would give you your starter Pokemon, and you would be there within 5 minutes. And it wasn't particularly hard to work out what was going on in those days. This is just the beginning of the game. Now, however, I fear that it takes at least 4-5 times the amount of time to actually get there. Sun and Moon have taken an entirely different approach from the older games, assuming not only that you haven't played a Pokemon game before, but that you may have never played a video game before, holding your hand not just at the start of the game, but actually throughout the whole thing. In my recent playthrough of Pokemon Sun, I was hard-pressed to find a single route throughout the game where upon entry, I wasn't greeted with lines of dialogue telling me who the character was that was talking, or where I was going next, or what this place was, rather than picking up that stuff from NPCs who were littered around the map. And I know what people are going to say, Pokemon is for kids, but then so were the original Pokemon games, and I get that the kid generation now is slightly different. They're used to playing games on mobile and being immediately satisfied. Maybe you could argue that they don't have the attention span to sit down and play a game and work it out for themselves. They need to be directed, and in my opinion, and this is of course just my opinion, that leads to really dull gameplay. Not only do you not have choice or freedom, but now you're being patronized being the game as it holds your hand through every single moment of the game. There has to come a point past the early stages where the player must be invested by now and you can stop holding my hand. This is what I think while playing Sun and Moon, but it never truly does. Also, I don't know about other players, but reading excessive amounts of dialogue with no choice in the matter doesn't actually make me more invested in the story world. There comes a point where I just want to bash the A button as fast as possible and turn the text speed up so I don't have to read it, because I can work out most of the clues about the story from visual aids. I don't need all this dialogue. Honestly, I think it comes across as a lack of respect for younger and beginning players who might become really invested in these wonderful worlds if only they weren't being so mollycoddled. Also, as a kind of side ramble, a 2A, if you will, is the difficulty curve in these games. That is, that there is none. The games don't get progressively harder anymore, and this might just be because I'm an adult, but then again, playing Gold and Silver recently, there are sections of the game that I find particularly difficult. The ever-infamous Whitney and her Miltank isn't difficult because she's got a particularly high-level Pokemon or anything like that, but unless you know about the secret Machop in Goldenrod City, up until that point, there's no Pokemon that you have that will have some type advantage against Whitney. By placing the gym leaders in strategic points where you will not have a type advantage Pokemon, those challenges become really challenging. In Pokemon Yellow version in particular, when battling Brock and taking him on, unless you had a Butterfree with Confusion or a Mankey with Low Kick or maybe a Nidoran with Double Kick, you were pretty screwed. Defeating him was earning a real reward. It was the game testing you and challenging you, and that's being fun. But the first big challenges for you in Sun and Moon are the normal and fighting type. Normal type Pokemon that don't have big stats like Miltank, or fighting type Pokemon where you may well have a flying type, maybe even as your starter Pokemon. These challenges are not challenges. It just makes the game feel like one big tutorial the whole way through, and between that and the dialogue, I fail to see what's really fun about the main story of Pokemon here. And so to end part 2 of this little video essay, I would say what makes a good Pokemon game is having respect for the players when it comes to the story. Challenge us, make us think, have respect for us. We will overcome the challenges that you give us. Part 3 or 4 that I'd love to investigate is the legendary Pokemon. At first, in Generation 1 there were 5, then there were 6 in Generation 2, then we added 10, and then the number just kept on creeping up. More recently, the number has gone down, which is a great thing. However, one of the big differences between Gold and Silver and then the later games is that those box art legendaries are not particularly legendary in any sense of the word, other than we're being told that they are. In Gold and Silver, it wasn't required that you found Ho-Oh and Lugia, but you knew they were important. You needed a special item to find them. Lugia was deep in the Whirl Islands, where you'd have to have all sorts of HMs to get through without getting lost and confused. Ho-Oh was in the top of a tower, which had a puzzle that you had to get through. When you finally encountered the Pokemon, be prepared for a battle where you might want to put on a status condition or have lots of Ultra Balls. You're going to want to save beforehand and reset the game until you can catch it, because these Pokemon, they were difficult to catch. And when you did finally catch them, it was earned. It was a real challenge. Now, however, the box art legendaries are in your path. You have to encounter them to finish the game, and in most cases, you have to catch them. In these more recent games, catching the legendary Pokemon is not anymore a suggestion or recommendation or something that's out the way, an extra puzzle, or something that you even earn. It's something recommended to you, something that you have to do to complete the game. And many of them are catchable with a single quick ball. Many of them you don't have to weaken at all. They still do manage to have some out-the-way Pokemon that are a little bit harder. I think the Delta episode of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire did a good job with Deoxys and making it difficult to catch, which would be a little bit more impressive if it wasn't right after Rayquaza, which you caught with just a single Ultra Ball. I mean, okay, not in everyone's situation, but a lot of people complained that this Rayquaza was super easy to catch because it was expected that you needed to catch it for part of the story. You needed this Rayquaza so that you could battle Deoxys in the first place. At this point, I'm wondering why didn't they just gift it to you? And that's part of the problem as well, because legendary Pokemon shouldn't be gifts, they should be earned. Generation 4 did a good job of at least having extra areas hidden within the game's code where you could go and challenge the Pokemon in battle and earn it. Now mythical Pokemon are just given to you, and I think that takes away from quite how special they are. Even in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they quote-unquote fixed it so that you'd have to go and battle Ho-Oh and Lugia as part of the story, and in my opinion, that was one of the worst things that they did. Ho-Oh and Lugia shouldn't be a recommendation, they should be a reward. We know these Pokemon are special already, they're on the box of the game. But with every legendary Pokemon, there should be a puzzle, there should be some challenge. Generation 3 Regipuzzle was incredible for this. And yet more and more I can't help but feel that legendary Pokemon just sit there like trophies waiting to be caught. And so there's part 3 of what I think makes a Pokemon game good. The legendaries must be legendary. And the fourth and final aspect I really wanted to discuss is the characters. Yours and those around you. Let's take a little peek at the rival archetype. The rivals are characters that are usually praised in the early games for being challenging and interesting, and in the later games are somewhat frowned upon. Silver and Blue challenged you because their way of training Pokemon was different to your way. They were going to do it through strength and you were going to do it through friendship. As a result of that, both of you were competing for the same goal but using different methods. That is a true rival. But even as early as May, we kind of lost that a little bit. She wasn't going for the same goal as you, not really. She was going for a different goal. She just wanted to see as many Pokemon in the Pokedex as possible, which is, of course, an interesting goal and an interesting rivalry to have, but ultimately, it makes it less satisfying when you beat her. It would be a lot more satisfying if she challenged you to how many Pokemon have you seen, rather than a battle. Wally takes on the role of a rival in Generation 3, and he is a great example of a rival, because he's a rival that you don't know is a rival until the end of the game. When he finally battles you, you were there when he caught his first Pokemon. You were part of his adventure and his story. You almost want him to be able to beat you, except you want to win yourself. Again, that is a rivalry. As the games progress, however, and especially in Generation 6, the rivals just serve as props to let you know how great you are. Some of them seem to have very little personality, while others are very one-dimensional. How, as a character, to me, is not very interesting. He plays the same joke every moment of the story, and while he's going for the same goal as you, he's using the same method as you. Love and friendship for all of his Pokemon. In fact, he has more personality than you do. The game would be better if you were playing as Hal with Gladion as your main rival because of their contrasting differences in the ways they want to raise Pokemon. However, How is just an extension of you. He's more of the same. He's not a rival, he's just a prop to serve to tell you how good you are. You, on the other hand, as a character, are very wooden. The transition to 3D made perfect sense with X and Y, and I don't quite understand what happened between X and Y and Sun and Moon. But in X and Y, your character actually showed emotion, and this is important. When you're taking on the blank character, the blank canvas archetype, you're looking at characters like Link from The Legend of Zelda, characters that you can project yourself onto. It's not the story of a specific person, it's the story of you going on your Pokemon adventure. But there still has to be traits about the player character that you can latch yourself onto. This usually comes in the form of their reactions and emotions to scenarios going on. However, with the player characters in Sun and Moon, the most you can latch onto is the fact that they have a face and fingers and feet and a body. Other than that, they have no other human-like traits. Even in the most dire of situation, your character just stares blankly. And this is why I say How would make a much better player character for Sun and Moon. He shares all the same traits as you, except he actually expresses emotion. Even if it's a little bit overboard, at least it's something. The player character in Sun and Moon is a blank canvas and completely not memorable at all. When you look back to those older rivals, like Blue or Silver for example, something interesting happens in the post-game. Once you've both achieved your goal, Blue begins to understand why maybe his method of training Pokemon wasn't the right one and why you came out on top. Professor Oak tells him it's because you had love and affection for your Pokemon and he didn't. In Gold and Silver, very much the same thing happens, where in the post-game you rebattle Silver. He looks different and has a Crobat. Crobat instead of Golbat, a Pokemon that evolves with high friendship. You have had an impact on the story, and both in the way that your character acts and your rivals around you. This is, I think, the fourth important thing. You must have impact. This isn't to say that it's bleak though, and that all Pokemon games have gotten worse over time. Many of them excel where older games have completely fallen flat on their face. Pokemon is a learning process, and the people making those games are devoted. The character of Lily, for example, is one of the best characters in the world of Pokemon, very well developed, and not through dialogue, but through the things that she does in the game. And the regions, while they've become linear, are getting more and more beautiful as ever, more and more detailed. No Pokemon game is perfect. And as well as that, you can completely respect the choices that some of the creators may have made to make these games happen the way they have. Again, it's about engaging the audience of today, the kids of today, which are different than the kids of when I was younger. Not in a bad way, not in a good way, just in the way that they are. It's important to engage with them. But these are just the 4 elements that I think maybe need to be further developed in the later games. Choice is needed in the region, respect is needed in the story, the legends must be legendary, and your characters must have impact. These elements, I think, truly connect you to the world of Pokemon and make those stories mean so much more to the people playing them. But of course, those are just my thoughts. I invite you to discuss even more in the comments. These are the thoughts from a fan. Soar high, Pokemon Masters. A special thank you to the patrons of this month who allow me to make this channel what it is, and in particular the big patrons of the month, Andros Le Fay and Braylinn. Thank you.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Bird Keeper Toby. That makes you a